Good day, mates, and welcome back to another episode of Fisticuff Central. I'm not going to say that again, and I promise I'm not going to do any more Australian accent or even attempt that because that was just absolutely woeful. So, we're here for UFC 305, which is in Perth, Australia. So, this is a fun card. We've got a title fight, which is the main event of the evening. Israel Adesanya taking on the current champion, Dricus Du Plessis. And next up, then after that, we'll have Steve Erceg versus Kai Kara France. The third down on the card is Mateusz Gamrot versus Dan Hooker, and the last fight that we will be covering will be Tai Tuivasa versus Jairzinho Rosenstruck. So a bunch of fun cards, a bunch of fun fights on the card, and let's get ahead and break down the main event. Dricus Du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya. Now, this is a right interesting one. So, Israel in his last performance wasn't too good against Sean Strickland. Prior to that, came back on top of the world with a spectacular knockout of Alex Pereira, and before that, losing his title in a long fight, and it was a TKO in the fifth round, something. It was premature. I personally do a little bit, but nonetheless, it's been an up and down journey recently for Israel, going from lows to highs to crashing back down again, and all the controversy that surrounded him, regarding the trash talk and some of the weird allegations, and the fact that he flew so many different flags throughout his career as well, and Sean Strickland just absolutely ate into him. So, what kind of Israel are we going to see? That's the real question. We're going to see somebody that's mentally fit, 100% there. Like, it did seem like Sean definitely rattled Israel. So, is he going to come back at his best? We're going to find that out. And Dricus as well, he's coming off, a very high moment for him. In his last two fights, he beat Sean Strickland. Close fight, some argued that it was for Sean, but I think the vast majority of people were happy with the decision. There wasn't outrage and people saying that he got robbed. It was quite an even fight for the most part, right? And then before that, taking Rob Whittaker out in spectacular fashion, the fella didn't mess about. He got him out of there pretty damn quick. I believe it was at the end of the first round. Or the second, oh god, I'm not 100% sure. He definitely hurt him, and then followed it up on the cage, if I remember correctly, and he just stalked him and he finished him. So Dricus Du Plessis taking out Robert Whittaker. It's not easy to do that. Only Adesanya's really done that at middleweight. He's only lost to two people in the last decade or so as Rob Whittaker, and he's taken out a lot of top contenders as well. So that's a really good finish on his resume. Both fighters having finished Rob Whittaker. The first time round for Izzy in quite spectacular fashion too, getting essentially two knockouts, with that last hit of the first round, and then, quickly picking up in the second and taking him out of there. So how does this fight play out? Let's break down the fight then. This is quite a tricky one because, on the feet, it'd be easy to give Israel Adesanya the advantage. He's probably the more technical fighter. I don't think many would dispute that. Definitely got the reach and range. That's just an objective truth. But in terms of strike accuracy, Du Plessis is really up there, and I think he's quite underrated. As we both saw with Sean Strickland, having both fighters fought Sean Strickland, Dricus Du Plessis had a lot more success, and both of those fights predominantly played out on the feet. There was very little wrestling, in either of those two fights, and Dricus Du Plessis definitely got, at least evens with Sean Strickland, whereas Adesanya really struggled, and I think it's because of something that Dricus himself said, that he kind of throws, one or two shots, does Israel. He's not really throwing volume, so he's able to predict that. Then Sean is able to kind of like slip the punches, whereas Dricus, he's missing one or two to land maybe the third or fourth, whereas you don't really see Izzy do that, because involved in that, in throwing a combination, you kind of leaving yourself defensively exposed potentially, or overextended, which then means that you could end up getting countered or hit. Something that Dricus is more willing to do than Israel. Israel kind of wants to hit and not get hit, so he's in and he's out. The problem is in those 1 or 2, he kind of lunges in, and then Sean's not there to be hit. He slips, because of his Philly shell style, is kind of going left and right, and he found that really awkward. Now, I don't think that's going to be as much of an issue, so I think that Dricus is going to be far more hittable for Israel. However, fighters that have pressured him, like Kelvin Gastelum, like Sean Strickland that walked him down, they've had a lot of success. And it's pressuring correctly, so it's not lunging in looking for those shots. It's kind of like the walk down technique. The lunging technique, we've seen that from Rob Whittaker. Allowing, and that didn't go well for him, did it? And then when, fighters sit back and allow Izzy to sit on the outside, that goes terribly too. And maybe not as badly, it depends. Your Romero kind of stood there and you kind of had his legs beat up, but nothing too much happened. Paulo Costa just got pieced up on the outside until I was literally incapable of fighting. I say that it kind of got TKO'd, didn't it? But incapable of fighting, right? He was stood there and he looked bamboozled. So this is such a tough one for me to pick. I'm genuinely unsure. I think on the feet, it's more even than some people might think. A lot of people might actually give Israel the advantage in the stand-up, and I probably still do, just because he's more technical and he's more rangy. I think Israel at the top of his game is probably a bit better than Dricus at the top of his game in terms of striking. However, the one thing that Dricus also does have is good wrestling, and he's a thick dude. I think he could potentially utilise that to his advantage. It's a mixed martial arts fight. I think if he's able to have good fluidity to his game, going from the stand-up to the wrestling, I think it could cause some problems for Adesanya. Thinking back to the way that Blachowicz took him down when Izzy went up to 205 to challenge for the title. He has to get him in the middle of the cage. It's tough to take down a tall opponent when you're putting them up against the cage, because they can really use the leverage. They can really, spread the legs, and and they can reach down far. So even if you go quite low, you're still able to grab that wrist if you've got really long arms. So I think overall you would up against the fence, I'd favour Izzy to be able to keep it on the feet. I don't think that Dricus has really got enough chain wrestle, at least from what I've seen. You never know with these guys. Sometimes it can shock and stun you, and just come out with something throughout the fight, right? But overall, against the fence, I think that Izzy would probably, keep himself up on the feet. In the middle of the cage, if Dricus can really time those takedowns, I think that he'll be able to take it to the mat, if they time correctly, obviously. So, oh man, I'm just so torn on this fight, because I really don't know. It's not good. I really should have maybe thought of who I want to pick, but I kind of just try to wing it. I want it to be as authentic as possible, and I'm really not trying to stick to anything, so I kind of just get the camera rolling and see how it goes. I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna go with Dricus. I'm gonna go with with the man on top at the moment. I think Israel's been a little bit inconsistent. I still could see Israel getting. I think it's a pretty 50-50 fight, but I think confidence could be potential an issue for Israel. He seems like somebody that's been rattled a little bit, by some of the things that Sean Strickland said, and at times it does seem like Dricus Du Plessis has got into his head. I haven't watched the press conference yet, but I did see some memes that Israel was crying or something. So if that's true, then mentally speaking, that's not a good sign. Could go one or two ways. He could fight his heart out, or he might just go in there and be shell-shocked almost, and unaware of what the best course of action is. So we're going to leave it for this one, because I'm really genuinely not sure. So I'm going to go with Dricus Du Plessis. I think most likely a decision. I don't think he finishes him. Maybe a TKO. Most likely doesn't knock him out on the feet. Maybe does knock him out on the ground through some ground and pound. But let's go Dricus Du Plessis and let's move on, because I'm completely lost on this one, guys. So, Steve Erceg versus Kai Kara France. This is an interesting one. You've got a technician, Steve Erceg, who really understands how to utilise his reach and range for the weight class, and then you've got Kai Kara-France, who's just a little pit bull. The man is very ferocious, throws with the intent to knock you out. I think he's a fun fighter to watch, and I think this is going to be quite a fun matchup, actually. I do fear that potentially Steve Erceg might try to get this to the ground. If it's on the feet, the game plan's quite simple for Steve. It's going to be keeping on the outside. Kai Kara is going to try to close the distance and land some big bombs, maybe to the body, to the head, and try to get him out of there. It's going to be easier said than done. Steve Erceg almost won that fight against Pantoja. It's a very close fought fight, and I think technically he is one of the more gifted fighters in the division. I don't think that's really up for debate. So I think Steve Erceg is going to take this. I think Kai Kara-France is not as technically good. He's shorter, he doesn't have the reach. I don't think he's as well rounded. He's lost a bunch of fights, throughout his career. I just think Steve Erceg's a better fighter, and I think you're going to see, him become a staple of that 125 division. So I'm going to keep this one short and sweet, and I am going to say Steve Erceg by submission. I think by submission. I could see him hurting Kai, bringing him down, and then, submitting him. I think that's potentially the way that it goes. Kai could catch him, but I just think it's unlikely. I don't know if he's still got it anymore. He's taking some time off. I don't think he's fought in a good year, something around that. And it's unfortunate. I think Kai's likeable and entertaining, but I'm going to go with Steve Erceg on this one. So, moving down to the next fight, it's Poland's very own Mateusz Gamrot. I have to just squeeze that in, against Dan Hooker. Now, yet again, I'm just going to be honest, I have a bias in this one. But I actually think my bias is the favourite, and is the favourite for a good reason. So, Mateusz Gamrot, phenomenal wrestler. A little bit predictable with his wrestling. I'd say that's my biggest criticism of his, but his chain wrestling is excellent. He's fought similar guys who've been able to take them down before, i.e. Jarlin Turner. And I know Dan Hooker in his last outing beat Jarlin Turner, and that was a phenomenal fight. Broke his forearm, and actually fought a significant portion of that fight with a broken forearm. Dan Hooker's a stud. He is just a fun fighter to watch. He goes out there with the kill or be killed mentality. Everybody loves that fight with Dustin Poirier. Since he had some ups and downs since then. The Michael Chandler knockout was pretty rough, and then along with the Arnold Ireland knockout was pretty rough. But he's had some good performances in there as well. With the last one, like with Jarlin Turner, with Nasrat Haqparast, sorry if I've mispronounced that. I won that fight. He also TKO'd the jiu-jitsu fella. What were he called? The one like Oliveira, not Charles Oliveira, but somewhat along those lines. Forgot his name as well. But he had them in that heel hook, didn't he? And Dan Hooker just sat there. He's like, cool, just gonna let you burn your arms out. He wasn't even bothered about it. Just tear my knee off. Stood up, body shot, boom. End of the fight. So, Dan Hooker's fun. It really is. But, while Mateusz Gamrot's style might not be the most entertaining, and he's had some fluky wins, if we're just being completely honest. The one against Rafael Fiziev comes to mind. It was unfortunate. He did actually quite well on the feet while that fight lasted. I don't feel like he was completely outgunned while he was losing the stand-up. It was edged. It wasn't, one-sided beat down. I just think that the relentless wrestling is not going to favour Hooker at all. We've seen Hooker be taken down time and time again, and I think a wrestler of Gamrot's calibre and quality will be able to take Hooker down, and he's just going to neutralise him, wear him down, and potentially get a TKO, maybe a submission. There is a path where Gamrot gasses, because I've seen him gas a fair few times or gets caught, so I think Hooker could actually knock him out. Do see that as a possibility. Even though he's got an incredible gas tank, he's just so predictable and relentless, and he just doesn't stop. He doesn't give himself a breather. Maybe he's hoping to, wear his opponent down, and even if it means that he wears himself down, he's like, well, I'm going to make you more tired. Maybe that's Gamrot's approach, for most of his fights. But I have seen him gas numerous times. Once again, Spinel, where he got dropped, you could tell he was exhausted. He just kept going for those takedowns, and they were just so obvious. And that's the one thing you can't be, in fights. It's completely predictable, because then you can counter something. I remember with Derek Lewis fighting Curtis Blades, just making yourself predictable. One big uppercut, good night, end of story, right? But, once again, I feel like I'm tripping up, going one way, going the other. I just feel like Mateusz Gamrot's going to be too good for him, and I just don't see Dan Hooker winning. There is a path to victory, of course, there always is, but I'm picking Mateusz Gamrot in this one, and I'd like to think that he does it by submission, but if not, decision. I see the knockout as the least likely path to victory for Gamrot. So, moving on to the last fight that we're going to be covering, which is also another fun fight. Like the co-main event, I think it's almost fireworks guaranteed, with Tai Tuivasa and Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Now, both of these guys have had ups and downs recently, having wins and losses. And, Tai recently losing to Martin Tabora. Jairzinho's, had a fair few unfortunate fights, to be honest. Over the last few years, I remember famously him getting knocked out by Francis Ngannou, getting clipped, just on the end of his punch. And then afterwards losing to Cyril Gane when he was on the way up. And yeah, this is definitely going to play out on the feet, you'd like to think. Although sometimes when you get, two strikers and one striker starts losing a bit, or one is actually getting an advantage, they might try to initiate the takedown to either maybe stall the fight if they're getting hurt, or if they're winning, to kind of take the round for 100%, leave no question that they've won that round if they're already winning, maybe kind of finish the round off in a dominant position, gives it, it's a good look for the judges, right? A few fights ago, I'd give this a tie, but, he's currently on a 3 or 4 fight losing streak. That worries me a little bit. Where is he going to be at mentally? He clearly doesn't always look after himself the best. He's quite notorious for partying. He himself has stated before that, he's more bothered about keeping himself happy and living a good life rather than just winning the belt. So he's clearly not that disciplined. And, I think a big part of what made him successful was his toughness, was his keenness to move forward and make it a scrappy fight. That's something that, he's really known for. That's really his style as a brawler. He's got decent kicks, predominantly keeps them low, but sometimes it does go high. Doesn't really engage too much in wrestling. And yeah, oh God, I've just remembered, the fight that Tai fought against Derek Lewis, where he was up against the fence, and he was literally crushed right in the corner of it, and he was taking huge bombs. He was able to get himself up and then finish Derek Lewis. Wow, Tai was fun to watch. His fight against, what was that? Greg Hardy. That's the one. The former NFL player. That was just a backwards and forwards fight as well, and. He's involved in some fun fights this time. Even in his loss to Martin Tabora, he did crack him a couple of times. But Jairzinho's going to definitely be a more technical striker. He's an actual former kickboxer, whereas Ty's kind of a brawler. He definitely leaves more openings. I think you could maybe make an argument for Ty's boxing being a little bit better. Maybe a bit more unorthodox, but I think more effective. It'd be difficult to dispute that. Jairzinho probably actually has the power advantage. I don't know. It's a tough one. It's such a tough one to break down in that sense, because I think overall boxing does go for the tie. I think Jairzinho might have more power. He just doesn't always land as cleanly with those big bombs. You don't really see him land those big bombs as often with his hands. But I probably would just give Jairzinho the power if you were to land fully clean. I think that, Tai coming in with the hooks and the overhands can maybe generate a little bit more power. I'd favour Rosenstruck straight over Tai Tuivasa straight, but I probably would. Yeah, I probably would give overall boxing to Tai Tuivasa. He might not have the most powerful shot out of the two of them, but I think he's just an overall better boxer. So how do I see this fight playing out? Well, most likely it's going to be a knockout, but it's a coin flip. I think ultimately it's a coin flip. I don't think Jairzinho's in the best position either mentally. I'm going to go with Tai just because it's home ground. It's just I was honestly going to go with Jairzinho, but I'm genuinely going to go with Tai now, just because of the fact that I think, you know, they're in Australia, home crowd. He might be riled up. He might just go out there and try to starch him, and I think he could catch him early if he just puts the pressure on. So yeah, screw it. We're gonna go with Tai Tuivasa, and that pretty much wraps it up for today. You know,